When Tessa went on a solo dive in a notoriously dangerous spot, she felt prepared for anything that could happen. But being attacked by a massive angry octopus was not on her list of predictions. And while the creature was luckily not trying to eat her, it didn't seem like it was going to leave her alone anytime soon. Not until Tessa found out what it was after her fall. Tessa started swimming to the surface as fast as she possibly could. She had to get away from there, but it was already too late, it seemed. She felt the first tentacle wrap around her leg already. How could she possibly outswim an octopus of this size underwater? Tessa felt herself getting pulled back down underwater and tried her hardest to stay calm. Panicking would not help her at all in this situation. Tessa knew she had to wait for her opportunity, and that came. She got loose and to the surface, but the octopus would not leave her alone even there. Why did she set out on this diving trip alone? But what did the octopus want from Tessa? Why was it so incredibly determined, and would Tessa be able to get away from it on her own? Welcome to Wonderbot Animals. Do not dive in those waters. On her travels, 21-year-old Tessa heard many things about a specific place. It was in a very remote country where there were areas with strong currents, underwater labyrinthic caves, poisonous creatures, and large, dangerous animals. Everyone who knew the least bit about the place told her. Tessa had already visited many places, yet this wasn't one of them. But now, she was dead set on going to it, and even though everyone warned her, she was also confident she would dive in the dangerous waters. She was not going to be repelled by rumors and simple, meaningless dangers. She's not like that. She's very different. For years now, Tessa had been a thrill seeker. For her, the best feeling was that of adrenaline being pumped through her veins. When she dived for the first time into a lake near her house, she felt the greatest sensation ever. Eventually, she got a diving license. She visited many places around the world and swam in the most dangerous places. Still, she could never sate her thirst. That is why she decided to head to this diving spot. Even though she liked danger, she didn't want to die, so she went there in the summer because diving spots tend to be full of people in that season. That would mean help could arrive to her. But when she finally arrived at the place, her expectations were broken. People were at the beach, boats could be seen far away on the horizon, but no one was diving. Those who did dare put their feet in the water didn't stray too far from the beach. No one had water above their belly. Tessa was probably the only person keen on actually diving there. I guess the rumors are true then. It wasn't hard for Tessa to imagine why there were no divers there. The dangers and risks lurking beneath those waters probably inspired fear. She mused to herself, watching the waves and the families playing at the beach. The adrenaline filled her body as she wondered what each person thought about this place. What would they think when they saw her diving? After a while, she went to the hotel. There, she checked and organized all her diving equipment. She had her things in order, however, she still had to buy some small tools from a local shop. They tried to charge her for an outrageous price, but she managed to convince the vendor to sell the items for their normal value. That was only the first step, though. Money solves everything. Even with all the necessary equipment acquired and put in order, Tessa still needed to get to the actual diving area. For that, she required a boat and a guide, knowledgeable enough to get her there, Tessa thought to herself. She had a considerable amount of cash and was willing to spend a lot just to dive. She couldn't just go to the beach and swim to the place. It was too far away and would drain her energy. Besides, her equipment was too heavy. She needed a vehicle. And so she went to the local port looking for a boat owner, fisherman, or anyone willing to take her to the diving area. It wasn't as easy as she thought it would be, however. "We don't go there, miss." "The place is cursed." "Are you crazy?" The things Tessa heard were all the same. Not even a single soul wanted to take Tessa there, no matter how much money she offered. Needless to say, by the 20th attempt to ask someone to take her to the diving spot, she was feeling very frustrated. "Why won't they take me there?" "It's not like they're going to dive with me. If they think it's so dangerous, they can just stay on the boat and wait for me there. She thought to herself, groaning. For Tessa, taking her there would put no one in danger but her. If no one's willing to go there with me, I'm going by myself. Still, as much as she tried, she couldn't find a guide. She found a solution though. It was when she looked at a sign saying, "Motorboat rental." She spoke to herself while counting her money. Tessa rented the boat for the next day. It was morning when she took all her equipment and supplies down to the port. She carried a map with her to find the diving spot. When she was ready to turn the boat on, she looked around. Only a couple of boats were on the water and no one was at the beach. The place was as empty as it could get. Tessa excitedly thought about all the secrets there could be beneath these dangerous waters. If no one was diving there, it meant many undisturbed artifacts were probably sitting on the seabed. With her map, her great navigational skills, and her urge to explore, she managed to get to the diving spot. She looked at the water. The adrenaline was already filling her veins. With the sun already rising up in the sky, the clear waters were illuminated. She hastily put on her gear and wasted no time to plunge into the sea. When she looked around her, a beauty Tessa had never even seen before was right there, right before her eyes. She had never seen anything like this place. Everywhere she looked, there was life. Fishes, big and small, swam quickly around her. Since they probably rarely saw human beings, they weren't afraid of her. In fact, they got so close she could almost touch them. It was the first time she saw sea creatures so naturally close to her. Besides the fish, there was even more to see. This isn't dangerous. It's the opposite of dangerous. Deeper below, Tessa saw rocky formations that had vast colonies of corals in perfect conditions. Even though she realized that this was only possible due to the lack of human interference, Tessa couldn't help but think that this was a view everyone should have, at least once in life. She couldn't understand why people didn't come here. She floated around the groups of fish and the corals. She realized that the rumors were being spread most likely as a way to keep people far from this underwater paradise. Humans can destroy anything they come close to, so the locals' efforts made sense. For a moment, she was thankful for the stubborn locals. But her gratitude died quickly because she found out the actual reason behind the rumors. She was very close to a sizable rocky formation, watching a coral. Her diving glasses were almost touching the coral when bubbles started coming out from somewhere beneath the rocks. Something big started moving. Tessa's heart skipped a beat and she swung her limbs forward to swim backward, away from the sudden menace. Then, she saw it. There was a very big hole in the rocky formations. Even bigger than the hole, though, was the giant octopus that crawled from inside, with its tentacles spreading all around, looking for anything to hold onto. With its size and speed, it managed to accelerate towards Tessa. She scaredly tried to kick it with her flippers, but, as anyone would expect, that didn't work. One strong tentacle got hold of Tessa's leg. Then, another tentacle firmly wrapped itself around her calf. She felt her whole body being pulled down, and the adrenaline was quickly being replaced by panic. But, to save oxygen, she did her best to stay calm. Obviously, that wasn't going to be easy. Tessa was already quite far underwater, and the huge, powerful creature was pulling her even further. She quickly realized that simply pulling off the strong tentacles was not going to work. She would need a plan B if she was going to get away and get back to the surface. The only way she could think of to get this octopus off of her was to somehow give it a scare. But what could she do to make it think she was potentially a danger instead of a meal? Her mind raced as she tried to think of anything that could save her now. Tessa still had her arms free as her legs continued to be tangled up in those strong tentacles. But that was all she needed to break off the 2 oxygen tanks at her back. She quickly tied the tubes of her mask to keep water from getting in, took a deep breath, and disconnected herself from the tank. Air immediately began shooting from the oxygen tank with a great deal of power and force, which is why it took her a little longer before she was able to adjust the tank to point the air toward the octopus. But would the strong force be enough to get the creature to let her go? In fact, it worked exactly the way Tessa had hoped it would. The octopus was so startled that it immediately released Tessa and she could get away. And it was not a moment too soon either. After all, Tessa was running out of air. Even worse, the creature had almost succeeded in dragging Tessa deep into one of the caves that she had originally intended to explore. Who knew what might have happened if it had succeeded in pulling her down into them? Tessa shuddered thinking about it, but she wasn't out of the woods yet. Without hesitating for a moment, Tessa began swimming back toward the surface as fast as she could. She knew that her quick pace could potentially cause decompression sickness, but she didn't have a choice. She needed to get away quickly, and she needed air. She started getting close to the surface and saw the outline of a boat. She was safe. It had to be her own boat after all. But the closer she swam up, the larger she realized the boat was. Still, she was sure that whoever owned the boat would be able to help her. But would they want to? Tessa was going to need all the help she could get because the octopus had recovered and it was coming for her again. In fact, it was coming for her quite quickly, and she frantically began swimming with all her might. It took one last final push to reach the surface and get above water where she could take a deep breath. She came up right beside the large ship and latched onto the side of it, not caring who might be on the deck. She was frantically scrambling upward, pulling her feet out of the water. She felt the horrifying tight grip of the octopus around her ankles. It was trying to pull her back in again. Holding tightly to the side of the ship, struggling with the pull of the octopus on her ankles, and the pain of the decompression sickness coursing through her. She managed to pull the useless mouthpiece from her mouth and scream loudly for help. But would they hear her in time? 2 crewmen on the boat heard her scream and quickly looked over the edge. They were stunned by what they saw, but one was able to quickly leap into action. He was determined to help the strange woman who had just appeared out of nowhere on their boat. He jumped down to where Tessa was and pulled out a knife, slicing at the tentacles of the octopus. With one good slice, he was able to get the octopus to think twice about messing with Tessa. In fact, it seemed to think twice about the whole idea of being topside. The octopus released its grip and retreated back into the depths of the ocean where it had come from. Tessa, overcome with the decompression sickness and the adrenaline from the fight of her life, immediately collapsed, unconscious. The crewmen were left wondering what had just happened. The stress of everything that had happened resulted in Tessa being completely out of it for quite a while. The crewmen got her fully on board and into a bed to rest until she came to again. And in the meantime, they tried to figure out what had happened and what it meant. The ship headed toward shore quickly, not knowing just what might be happening to the strange new passenger they had picked up. But luckily, Tessa was not out for long. She awoke still on board the ship and was able to tell the crewmen what had happened. It was a crazy story. She explained that she had planned to visit some of the nearly unexplored caves in the region. While they had been labelled as dangerous, she had thought it would be okay to take a look for herself. She admitted that she probably should have done more research. Tessa had assumed that when the locals said they were dangerous, they meant things like poisonous fish or strong currents, things she was used to and could defend against. She hadn't been prepared for a giant octopus that wanted to attack humans. The crewmen couldn't believe the idea of a man-eating octopus. After all, it seemed like something the locals would say to scare off would-be tourists. It couldn't be something that actually existed, right? They just couldn't believe it no matter what she said. But someone else knew what she was talking about. Once they had docked at the harbour, the captain of the boat came to check on Tessa. When he heard Tessa's story, he knew exactly what she was talking about, but he didn't have as much sympathy for Tessa as she may have thought, especially after what she had just gone through. The captain had been sailing these waters for many years and was one of the many people telling the stories for people to stay away, and he most definitely told people to avoid going near the caves. There was a very good reason for that. The underwater caves were filled with coral and small underwater life, sure, but they were also areas where female octopi would lay their eggs. And that was one of the big reasons that these caves were so dangerous for people to visit. And one reason that Tessa shouldn't have been there. The octopi had seen the caves and rocky tunnels as a great place for their eggs because they were quite small and difficult for predators to venture into. The octopus that had attacked Tessa was likely just one of these females that had been protecting their eggs. But so violently? The captain and others in the area wanted to make sure that the octopi in the region were protected and their eggs remained safe. So they tried to keep people away. But they also made sure to keep the real story secret, since people might venture into the area if they knew. They were afraid that fishing boats would try to catch the octopi and their babies if they knew that this was a breeding ground. As a result, the rumors and the danger were non-specific, and many people were still tempted to venture into the area, not knowing just what they were getting into until it was too late. Tessa should never have ventured near the caves and should have avoided the area entirely the way the locals had told her. The captain didn't feel sorry for her after her attack. In fact, he felt that she had gotten what she deserved, being scared and chased by the octopus. Once Tessa had some time to think about her experience and get checked over by a doctor, she realized the captain was right. She felt bad about her selfishness and thought she was better than other divers who might have ventured into the area. But did she learn her lesson? Tessa decided from then on to only dive in approved locations, and she agreed to add to the rumors of the region that told others to stay far away as well. She wanted to make sure that no one else was attacked, but also that the octopi and their eggs were protected.